No, time to talk.
You get 4 minutes for the speech.
Ready? We must always strive to protect our rights, be that the right to life, the right to liberty, or the right to privacy. Now, I believe that my opponent was spot on in saying that we must always strive to protect our liberty. In doing so, we must strive to achieve national security. I couldn't agree more. National security is great. However, that does not mean that national security is greater than our liberty or the rights that come from liberty itself. Now, let's look at a few things. First of all, essentially, the way that I want to address my opponent's main theme, and this was also in our first point, essentially that terrorism inhibits our liberty. I would say I agree. Terrorism does inhibit our liberty. Terrorism can take away our rights. That's why when we pursue national security, when we want to take away terrorism, when we want to protect our people, we must do so in a way that still strives to protect what those terrorists are taking away, our rights and our liberty. With that in mind, I'm going to go over I'm going to clarify what I mean by warrants and consent, essentially how privacy does not deter national security, and then with that understanding, we're going to look at how national security and the pursuit of national security, the right to individual privacy should still be highest. So first, let's look at warrants and consent. Now, essentially, here is how warrants and consent help us understand the right, or can be used in the pursuit of national security to still value the right to privacy to be highest. Warrants are legal documentation that say essentially that law enforcement officers can invade our privacy, or that's what search warrants are. And so, warrants don't actually make police officers physically capable of doing something. It doesn't enable them in any physical way. Instead, it says you have the right to invade people's privacy now. Warrants are made so that the people's rights can be respected. Warrants are made so that the police cannot invade our homes whenever they deem fit. Instead, they have to go through a certain process, and the process is getting a warrant, making sure that there actually is a reason to search our person and our possessions. Now, in order for this to be true, we have to see that the purpose of warrants is to respect our rights. As mentioned in our Constitution and the Fifth Amendment, along with our right to privacy, and so we can see here that the purpose of warrants is made to essentially respect our rights, respect the fact that we actually have rights. That's why when the police use warrants to invade our privacy, they're doing so in a way that respects the fact that we have the right to privacy. Using warrants is showing that they respect our privacy even above national security. If they didn't use warrants, then they wouldn't be respecting that. Then they would be respecting national security above our individual right to privacy. Now let's look at consent. This goes a little bit more to the choice of a right. Now Andrew and I in cross-examination talked a little bit about voting. Now essentially when you have the right to vote, you can either choose to vote or not to vote. That's what a right is. It's a choice. And in the same case, this applies to privacy. We have the right to privacy, meaning that we have the choice of privacy. We can choose to have privacy or not to have privacy. We can see this come into conflict with national security in the instance of the Boston bombing. After Southards have been hiding from the police for days. The police have been searching all over along with the National Guard. They've been searching all over the city, but they still could not find the Boston bomber. And so this man found him in his backyard and called the police and said, "Hey, I found your terrorist, come over and pick him up." In other words, he was giving his consent. This shows us that national security was still something to be achieved, still something that we want, and yet the right to privacy was held above national security. With this in mind, let's look at my opponent's second contention. Essentially, she said that national security over privacy prevents terrorism. I would agree, but that doesn't mean that national security over the right to privacy prevents terrorism, or that is a good thing. Now, she brought up an instance when the police essentially invaded a man's, not invaded, but searched a man's apartment after they found his cell phone to find out what was going on. They found incriminating documents. Now, I have two responses to this. The first response is that if the police used warrants and they were pursuing national security in a way that respected the individual right to privacy above national security. If they didn't use warrants, then they should have, because a warrant would not have prohibited national security. This comes down to my second point. And my last speech, the right to privacy does not prohibit national security. We can use warrants, we can do things in the way, we can pursue national security in the way that it ought to be pursued by respecting our rights, and that does not deter national security. Thank you.